Hola, buen día, buenos días, good morning. My name is Ignacio Alamillo, Nacho for short. I'm general manager of a company called Astrea, and I'm deeply involved in SSI identity, which is my topic for today. Of course, we are a bit late, but hopefully we will be able to present everything we have to and recover some time. Well, this is my profile. From here, it is interesting just to understand that I have a PhD on the electronic identification regulation, which is actually enforced in the European Union. And this is important because we plan to use this regulation when we issue credentials, verified credentials for identities in the European Union. I'm also a member of the technical committee in ISO dealing with blockchain issues, and I'm co-leading a study period on trust anchors, meaning that we are studying how we get trust in verified credentials in electronic identities. So my presentation for today is going to be around what we are doing, what's the philosophical dimension for something called digital identity in blockchain or self-sovereign identity, and then I will introduce some of the topics we are dealing with in the project led by the European Commission to create a European self-sovereign identity framework, where I act as a legal expert. So after my presentation, of course, I will be available for any question you have in this really beautiful building we are. So when we talk about digital identity in the blockchain space, probably we are thinking in different types of technologies, because of course we have the need to identify things, we have the need to identify such as devices, we have the need to identify legal entities, we have the need to identify persons, and we have a need that these entities are able to interchange messages on any type of blockchain network. And there are several ways to do that. But today I'm really interested in one specific approach to digital identity, which is an approach called self-sovereign identity. I don't know if many of you are familiar to this concept. I guess yes, I see people nodding. So probably some of these slides for these people already knowing about self-sovereign identity are just introductory. For any person with a deep knowledge of self-sovereign identity, the first thing to understand is that this is a philosophical approach. So a self-sovereign identity is something defined as an identity system where the user is central to the administration of identity. Therefore, the best form to describe what digital identity is about in the blockchain is to say it is something that will give you autonomy, personal autonomy. So what we do, what we want in the digital identity space in blockchain is to give back the control of the usage of any identity information to the user. So as we are citizens, our intention is to be able to identify ourselves in front of any kind of entity, both private and public, but without being dependent on a third party. And this is something which is really new in the identity space, because all the identity systems we have today are based on third parties. So for instance, if we are using the Facebook identification system to access Spotify, for instance, we depend on Facebook. Facebook is able to decide which identity data is collecting. They are able to decide which identity data are we going to interchange, in this case with Spotify. And the worst thing, Facebook is going to be able to delete our account if we infringe their terms of use, and therefore we are going to disappear. So this is something which is really annoying, specifically in certain political spaces, and therefore probably we are all interested in being autonomous entities and having any dependency on third parties. If you have a look at this slide, you will see one vision of one of the fathers, let's say so, of this philosophical approach, which is Christopher Allen. This is something I have extracted from a paper from him called The Path to Self-Sovereign Identity. And there you can see on the left part of the screen, you can see the properties of a self-sovereign identity system which are desirable to have. For instance, we should have protection of our identity. We have persistence of our identity information, so it is not erased over time. We will need to, it is desirable to have minimization of the information which is exchanged in any kind of transaction, so we are not forced to identify too much for a specific purpose. But also it is important to have controllability, so it is the user who is entitled to control what information he is interchanging. And the most important part of this is the existence principle. I should exist on the network without depending on a third party. This is what technology is about in this case. For instance, the concept of a decentralized identifier is strongly connected with the idea of existence. So my identity should be previous to any registration process with any service provider. It is not Facebook who decides if I live on the internet. It is myself who should have the legal right to get an identity, an autonomous identity, and then being able to register to get credentials of any kind with any kind of provider, whereas public or private. So this is what the existence idea is about. Of course, control is very important. If I exist on the internet, but I don't have control over my identity, I'm really a kind of servant, kind of digital serf in this digital feudalism model. This is something we don't want to. And also consent. My identity data should not be interchanged without my consent. This is something which is really anchored in GDPR in the European Union, but in the United States is really a progressive approach because they don't have the same laws as we do, and probably this consent thing is going to be something weird for many people in the United States. And finally, probably we need portability. If my identity is not portable, it is not really autonomous. If I am tied to a specific blockchain, probably and I don't have the legal right to move, then we are going to face the same risk in the blockchain as we've had in self-service platforms, which is being property of a third party, in this case being the property of the owners of the blockchain. So portability is really a third block of things we are going to be interested in any kind of solution. So the idea is that the identity should be mine, and for this we should have all these properties in place. Okay, a bit more of technology in this case. This is an abstract depiction of an SSI architecture. It is illustrative. Here you can see the user agent on the center. The particularity in this case is that the user agent is who controls any identity credential who is going to receive, because he has a decentralized identifier. This decentralized identifier is anchored or registered in a blockchain, and therefore it will allow the user to get identity credentials. That means attributes such as name and surname, or even any personal attributes such as the fact that I am a lawyer. And then this is going to be under the control of the user agent. In this case, what is going to happen is that issuers from any kind are going to give me small pieces of information, which are called verifier credentials, for me to then interchange with third parties. These verifier credentials contain attestations or contain claims. For instance, Nacho is a lawyer. In this case, Nacho will get this credential, and this credential will be somehow anchored or registered in the blockchain. Once I have this credential, I am able to use it to authenticate in front of a third party. For instance, I could have a credential with my name and then authenticate against you, saying, okay, I'm Nacho. But I will have another credential saying that I am a lawyer, and then I will be proving that information. The particularity of the digital identity based on blockchain, when it is self-sovereign, is that I have the control to change this, to interchange this. It is not the issuer sending anything to the verifier. It is the issuer sending me the information, and it is me sending this information, presenting this information to third parties in the cases I think it is useful for me. Of course, as we need traceability, because for legal purposes, we might need to prove that Nacho actually authenticated against something, in this case, as being a lawyer, we probably need to register the transactions in the blockchain. So probably in the blockchain, you're going to see transactions regarding the provision of identity. Some, for instance, in the future, hopefully, Identicat project, the Catalan government says that Nacho is Nacho, and Nacho is a Catalan citizen. And then we also have transactions where Nacho identifies against a third party. And then we registered that Nacho, as was older than 18 years old, was able to vote. So in this case, what we're doing is to separately completely the identity provision part from the identity consumption part. And this is where privacy comes around the story. So if I have all the credentials with my name, surname, date of birth, then I can just share the information I need to. For instance, in a voting process, the only thing I have to prove is that I am national. Probably I could create a verified presentation stating that I am a Spaniard without giving away my name, my surname, and a second credential, second presentation saying that we are issuing that I am older than 18 years old, just to be able to proceed with the voting process. So this is what this story is about. So let's go for the benefits. In this case, if you look at the previous identity management systems we have, for instance, centralized systems based on PKI systems, digital certificates, or even based on federated systems, such as an OpenID and these sort of things, we have key benefits. For instance, one of the main key benefits compared to the Facebook model is that we reduce the risk of massive identity theft. This is because the identity credentials are owned by me. They are not in a central database. So probably if we deploy this technology, we're going to spare problems such as the 30 or 40 or 80 million user accounts being robbed because the database is hacked. So this is important for us. Also, as the identity provider is not intervening in the authentication process, it is not looking what we are doing, he is not observing what we are doing on the internet. When we authenticate with an SSI credential, it is easier to comply with GDPR. It is easier to reduce the risk even of a big brother, because this identity provider, such as Facebook, has not the ability to observe what we are doing, and therefore they do not collect any information about it. I am really worried about what is happening with these big identity providers, which are governments in the European Union, because we have created in the European Union a very big infrastructure for observing the activity of European citizens. If a German uses their MPA to authenticate in Spain, at least two governments are going to be aware of what they are doing, and they are going to store this information. I am not saying that they are going to use this for evil purposes, but they have the information. So, in fact, I have to trust them. With this kind of approach, we would get rid of these possible problems. And even it will allow us to define which identity data in an anonymized ways are interchanged. So, in fact, some people are saying that this is going to end with the digital feudalism business model, which is Facebook model at the end of the day. Okay, I'm saying all the time Facebook model, but believe me, it is all American companies, and even many of the European companies doing so. This is another approach. This is just an example. This is what we are defining in a Spanish association called Alastria. Here we have the user, we have the credential issuer, and then we have the service provider. In this case, you can see how Alice is generating keys on her own, and he's getting this decentralized identity just to be able to get credentials from issuers and being able to present these credentials to third parties. The idea is that for this to be in private and having traceability, we need to implement systems to decoupling any transaction from another one. So in the Alastria proposal right now, which is being used in the EPSI, in the European EPSI project, as an informative source and a very relevant informative source, what we do is to anchor the transactions using different hashes for each transaction. So in a verifiable credential where we put that Nacho is Nacho, we are going to include a signature, getting a large amount of entropy, and then we're going to produce the hash of this credential, and we are writing down into the blockchain the hash. So we have a proof that this happened, but we can't get access to the private information. So it is unlinkable with the same transaction when we present the information. The idea is that we need unlinkable systems to be able to have both transactions with valid proof, but also privacy. This is just a possibility. I'm not here to sell the Alastria model. In fact, the Alastria model is being also criticized because it is not so pure. because it is based on permission networks, and probably in a real SSI pure vision, we should be using unpermissioned networks. This is what the Identicat project here in Catalonia has announced. The idea of having this kind of services, this kind of systems, but anchored on public non-permission networks to give the citizen the maximum amount of control over their identity. A bit more. What about trust? Okay, now we have a system where we can create our identity on the internet, and it is under our sole control. Now we have the possibility to get credentials saying that I am Nacho, and my surname is Alamillo, and I'm a Spaniard or whatever. Okay, we have this. We have claims, but then we have the possibility to, in a private way, share these claims with third parties. But of course, what happens with trust? Why should a third party believe that my name is Nacho? Because we convey some trust on this assertion. Okay, if the claim issuer has some specific properties, for instance, being the authority for an attribute, then we can trust more this assertion that if it is my friend. For instance, if Santi Casa says Nacho is Nacho, this might be trustworthy, but probably it is more trustworthy if it is said by the authority in Spain that is assigning my name, which, by the way, is not the national police, it's the civil registry, which is something important. Then we need a way to convey trust to help the relying parties to use this information in real business processes, because otherwise it's going to be something theoretically. We were discussing before about this, but it's not going to probably work in the real world. And this is what we try to do when we look for what we call trust anchors. This is what the ISO study we are co-leading is about. So we still need to identify the real identity of Nacho, because otherwise you don't know who I am. In fact, nobody told you that I am actually Nacho. So I still have not been introduced to you. So you're trusting, in this case, the context. But in the internet, the context does not exist. So probably if I'm sending you a credential, I'm presenting a credential to you saying that I am Nacho, you should have some reasons to believe that Nacho actually is Nacho and not another person. So this is a real identity issue. So we have to understand how we convey this information in a credential. Okay? For that, we really need governance frameworks. So this is not something that comes out of nothing. Probably we need a governance framework to define how do we use SSI in legally binding processes, for business, for instance. In case of the democracy cases, this is very important because voting rights are assigned to not to everyone, but to people with certain characteristics. So probably we need to define how do we comply with this. And in the case of the verifiable credentials based on self-serve identity systems, this means working in different levels. For instance, we need to define security and trustworthiness measures in the verifiable credentials level. So if I am presenting to you an attribute, a claim saying I am older than 18 years old, if you have to trust this, probably you need to trust the verifiable credential. You have to trust that it has not been hacked, it has not been modified, it has been issued by this party and not another party. But of course, we also need to trust the deed itself. The decentralized identifier from Nacho should not be hackable, because if someone is able to take or seizure my deed, then he is able to substitute my identity, and then we have identity theft. So our system is going to work not only on the verifiable credential level, but also on the deed level. It should be secure. But also the keys, the cryptographic keys we use to control our identity should be fine. If we use bad keys because they are insecure, then a third party could also steal our identity. So we don't want this to happen. And of course, if we are using hashes to have traceability of the operations while maintaining privacy, we need these hashes to be secure. So this is something which can be problematic. We are working on studying in the ISO technical committee. It is not the only one, but specifically in ISO, there is a working group dealing with key management, because it is essential for control. Everything is based on cryptography when it comes to decentralized identifiers. And finally, of course, we should set forth properties to be able to trust the blockchain itself. If we are saying that autonomy is based in the fact that everything is traced, it is registered in a blockchain, of course, we need to be sure that this blockchain is secure enough. Otherwise, we're having problems. And this is something that has to do with, for instance, the security properties of the consent mechanisms. So if the consent mechanism is not good, it's hackable, then everything is hackable. So you could rewrite the whole story if you are able to touch the algorithm. So we also are looking at this DLT level. And then finally, we talk about trust anchors when we define where to go to check an information or where to go to be sure that your crypto is good enough. So in the European Union, we have here an opportunity because we could use our current legislation, which is the IDAS legislation, to define our trust anchors. The proposition of value in this case is to align the processes of issuing verifiable credentials with the IDAS legislation to help people trust these credentials. Therefore, in the EPSI project led by the European Commission with member states, one of the use cases which is being considered is the production of verifiable credentials which are aligned with the IDAS regulation. IDAS regulation is the main norm. Well, you can have a look at this later. It is the main norm dealing with trust when it comes to identity in the European Union. So right now, if a German is able to authenticate in Spain using the German national ID card, it's because we have this IDAS framework. The IDAS framework is defining legal conditions for the recognition of electronic identification means all around the European Union. Unfortunately, EID, based on IDAS legislation, is currently aligned with SAML technology, meaning that it is decentralized authentication. It is not self-sovereign identification. So it is a building block which is nice, but it is a building block we cannot use directly. Probably we have to study how to start from the technological perspective of the IDAS regulation to be able to define a new electronic identification interoperability and security scheme to be able to authorize the usage of the issuance of verifiable credentials that can be used in the European Union space. This is important because, IDAS is technology neutral, so we don't need really to modify the legislation. Probably we can tackle this issue by just approving a new technical specification, which is something that member states can do whenever they want. So I'm pretty confident that we will be able to convey trust in some types of verifiable credentials in the European Union with taking this approach as a baseline. And also it is important because this regulation is is having a real strong influence in the international space. Right now, the United Nations Commission for the International Trade Law is negotiating an international agreement, a new international law, to extend the recognition of these systems over the whole planet. This model law should be used by states outside of the European region to recognize electronic identification means from the European Union and vice versa. So probably if we align our SSI works with this IDAS approach, we are also aligning this approach with the international space. And finally, because I don't want to bore you too much, for that we have the coffee, I just want to share what we are studying right now in the EPSI project from the European Commission. Here, by the way, we have Santi Casas from Validated ID. He's also working in this project from the technological perspective. I am the legal guy, sorry. So I'm working in the really boring legal thing. But what we are doing right now is to analyze something we call the IDAS bridge. IDAS bridge means using IDAS pre-existing electronic identification means and qualified certificates to get verifiable credentials. Essentially, the business case is something like, if I have a Spanish national ID card, I can use it to create a deed and then obtain verifiable credentials with my name, my surname, my birth date, everything baked up and granted by the Spanish authority, which is in this case the Spanish government. And this is a good thing because the Spanish national ID has recognition all over the European Union because it has been notified under IDAS. So it would be the same case if I take the Estonian card. So if I have an Estonian citizen or even if I have an Estonian residency, then I could use this to get verifiable credentials which are legally binding. This is what a trust anchor is about. We inherit the trust from this official document and we put it into a verifiable credential. So we get the possibility of sharing just parts of the information, producing zero-knowledge proofs based on the information with more legal value because they are backed by an official instrument. So this is something interesting, and it also opens the space for private sector issuers of verifiable credentials if they also issue qualified certificates. So this is what we are studying. Probably by 15th of January, we have the deadline to end the report. So probably when EID in EPSI 1.0 is piloted, which is very small project, it is not really an ambitious project, but the first pilot, probably we will be able to show how is this working. And the last one, the other case, is is precisely the presentation. It is not about getting verifiable credentials, but presenting, using them in other governments. For instance, if let's imagine that I am a Spanish company, Catalan company in this case, I get an e-residency from the Estonian government, which is a very interesting and innovative model, and then I am able to create verifiable credentials for my company, and either for me as Nacho being the legal representative of my company. To be able to use to present these credentials in other government, what they should do is to connect the SSI infrastructure with the EID infrastructure. This is the second case. The second case is using verified credentials as IDAS identification means. And this is the most interesting part for me, from a legal perspective, because what we are going to do in the context of the review of the IDAS regulation next year is we are going to present exactly which changes should be done in the regulation to allow a person having a verified credential to present it to another European member state public sector body, thus covering the 50% of the GDP in Europe. So this is also, I mean, of course it is experimental, and of course I have to say that I'm not representing officially any position for the European Commission, not from any member state, but it's something we are studying. At least it is important for us to be creating these sort of projects and producing time. Okay, and finally, just final thoughts, new paradigm for identity management. Look, please, at the control on GDPR. And, of course, look at the possibility of reuse the legislation we already have. And that's all from my part. Thanks. Who's next?